Podcast.
Disabled New Zealanders have been advocating for it for decades, and in October last year, the government announced that they would establish a Ministry for Disabled People, eventually consolidating services provided by the Ministry of Health and Ministry for Social Development, as well as being an advocate for the needs of disabled people throughout the state sector. The aim is to establish the ministry by the 1st of July. That's an ambitious timeframe, and that work is being undertaken by the Establishment Unit. Despite disabled people with senior leadership experience applying for the role of the director of that establishment unit, to the consternation of many disabled people, a non-disabled public servant has been appointed to do that work. The news was buried in a pre-Christmas media release with a lot of talk about how disabled people would be consulted and at the table during this phase. A group of disabled leaders and advocates say that's not good enough. They've formed an organisation called Disabled Leadership Now, and it's holding an online protest rally, and I'm proud to be a part of that group. To discuss the issue with me, I'm joined by Pam MacNeill. Kia ora, Pam.
Kia ora, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be able to come along and talk to you about this today.
Tell me a bit about how Disabled Leadership Now came to be.
Well, I was one of the people who actually applied for the establishment director role, just in the interests of transparency. And like you, I was really sure that there would be a disabled person appointed to this role at long last. And it's been a dream of mine ever since the International Year of Disabled People in 1981. So that kind of ages me and shows you how long it is that we've been aiming for this. And I was absolutely horrified. I felt that we'd really been played like a violin, we being the sector, by government, that they had just gone along and taken what no doubt to them seemed like a very safe option to appoint a senior public servant. Having been a senior public servant myself, that was one of the reasons I thought that I would have a pretty good show of getting that role. I am at an age where I'm not looking to enhance my career or anything like that, but I felt that I had a lot to offer. And I believe that all disabled people who applied for that role had a huge amount to offer, not least the cultural capital of disablement, which we all bring. So we were horrified. So I sat around and stewed about it for a long time, 2 or 3 days. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. There's no point in me stewing about it. Why don't I find out what other senior activists in the disability sector feel? And when I say the sector, I'm talking about disabled people in New Zealand. So I contacted yourself and a few other people, and we all decided that actually it would be a really good idea to get together on a Zoom call and discuss the issue. And that's how DLN was born.
And as someone with chief executive experience in the sector and also advocacy experience, I applied as well. And I think the really interesting thing about this process was all of the disabled people that I knew about who applied were really supportive of one another. And we were all saying, look, if you get it, that's fantastic. But the most important thing is that a disabled person ends up in the role. Why do you think that public servants felt that it was in any way going to go down as okay that a non-disabled person would have this role?
I have no idea how they ever thought on any planet that it would be okay. The only thing I can say is that they probably felt the timing would shield them somewhat. So the announcement was made right before Christmas. It was pointed out, as you said, that some disabled people had been consulted, and I know that that was really a handful of people, certainly none of the senior people that have been around the traps a while that I contacted to join this group. So I really have no clue how they would have thought it was appropriate. But one of the things that really astounds me in this whole thing is the fact that people seem to think that there's a choice, and I know we've talked about this before, Jonathan, there's a choice between having a sector led by the people it supports, in this case disabled people, and people who have the capability and the qualifications. Now, lots and lots of disabled people have both, but there's always this implied choice that, disability in itself isn't enough. Well, it's got to be key cultural capital for any positions within a ministry for disabled people, but we also have to be suitably qualified, and every one of us was suitably qualified.
It reeks of cultural insensitivity, doesn't it? Something really wrong with the culture in New Zealand when it comes to disability, because this is not just about this particular situation. In so many organisations, we do not see disabled people in senior leadership roles. I think you could easily, with fingers to spare, count on the fingers of one hand the number of agencies, provider organisations for disabled people that are run by us in this country.
That's right. There's a dearth of leadership and management by disabled people in a sector that exists in our name. And I don't think any other grouping would put up with that at all. And it's actually tantamount to symbolic violence to say, well, you're not capable of doing this. And it's complete balderdash, of course.
Yeah, the fundamental problem with this is that it relies on the validation of a non-disabled person, right? And so
Yes.
it was always going to be a struggle to actually get those people to get out of the way and ensure that disabled people take control of their own destinies.
And it's so frustrating because, of course, people listening to this will think, hang on, this isn't new. And it's not new. We've had exactly the same discussions when women were trying to get some power in the world. We've had the same sorts of issues and have continuing conversations here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, among Māori who would like that opportunity too, to lead and manage their own sector and be in partnership. And that's what we're asking for as well. We want a partnership with government, and it's completely unacceptable that we're not even being listened to.
I don't know what the equivalent is, but this is the disability equivalent of barefoot and pregnant, really.
Yes.
Just keep us in our place. So why do you think that it's important that this rally take place, given that the appointment has been made? We're now in February. July is not too far away. Is it better just to focus on the next step, which will obviously be the appointment of a permanent chief executive?
I think we've got to make it very clear right now how incensed we are as a community that this has happened. There are some remedies that could perhaps be applied, and we'll discuss those at the rally and get some ideas from people as well. But I think once the Public Service Commission appoints an executive to the ministry, when the establishment phase has completed, we need to be making it very, very clear that we will not accept anything but a disabled person in that role, and as key competencies and part of that skill set for all positions within a ministry for disabled people. We need to say that loudly and clearly. We need to, for example, send messages such as we're not interested in a family being substituted for disabled people. We get that a lot, that people think that if they're family members, that means that they somehow know and understand the experience of being a disabled person. I don't want to detract from the knowledge and experience those people have, but it isn't the same. And we also want to make sure that the Public Service Commission understand that we know that one of the ploys that is often used in this type of argument is, well, we'll get someone who doesn't really look disabled and possibly may not even have any lived experience of disability. Again, I don't want to offend anybody, but come on, people, we need to really go with this. This is about disabled people. We need to be loud and proud here. So don't just try and hoodwink us with someone who doesn't really appear disabled and put them in, set them up to fail, and then say, oh gosh, that's terrible. That didn't work out because they weren't really able to do it. You know, I've seen these things happen before, and we need to let them know that we're ready for those things.
Can there actually be any negative long-term consequences of a non-disabled person in this transition director role? And if so, what do you think they are?
Well, in terms of setting a culture for the organisation and across the public service, yes, it's a huge negative consequence. And also in terms of accessibility, one of the things the government have said, we've said as disabled people, is that we want to increase accessibility across the country throughout all areas of life. And if we want to do that, we're going to have more show of doing it if we have a ministry that's led and managed by disabled people with the DNA of disability all through it at every level and including every impairment type.
What's going to happen at the protest rally, and what's the format of that?
We're going to have a rally that brings together disabled people. So the rally attendance must be by disabled people. We really want to keep this as a safe space for disabled people to be able to talk. There will be a live stream for viewing only on Facebook and YouTube for part of the rally. Once we get into the more strategic side, we will probably close off that stream so that people do feel safe to talk. We're so lucky to be able to have the facilitation services of Dr. Graham Innes from Australia to support us in this, and I know he's going to do a fantastic job. We will have a couple of video presentations from people who are key to this project but are not able to attend in person, and we're looking to possibly have a panel discussion. We will have to have some sort of strategic discussion about next steps, and we thought we might look at a panel discussion for that and get ideas from the floor. And then once the rally's over, we will look at press releases and media interviews to get the message out about our next steps.
Do you think this organisation has a long-term future, or will it simply disband once this work is done?
I suspect it will have a long-term future. It's going to depend on what people think, of course, but from my perspective, I'd like to see it have a voice in areas such as the commercial sector, business sector, and of course the disability sector more widely, particularly in the latter case, looking at leadership and management by disabled people in both the disability support services and disabled people's organisations, but also all of the disability-related work that government currently does. And I don't think everything will be hived off to the new ministry. So there's still a lot more work to do, I think.
We have an amazing team of leaders, not all of whom feel that they are able to have their names disclosed on the website or in public. Do you think that's a bit of a commentary on the climate of fear that exists in New Zealand, where it's perceived that if you rock the boat, even if you politely but firmly express yourself politically, you may be putting yourself at risk?
Yes, I think it's a real indictment in this day and age. If I go back to the International Year of Disabled Persons in 1981, that was one of the key drivers of the move to form groups like Disabled Persons Assembly. But there was a lot of fear. People were really scared that if they joined DPA, they would lose services, they would somehow be punished by service providers. And for people in residential support services, that was and is a real threat. And it's really unfortunate that we still have remnants of that old system hanging around today and those old fears, and they're real.
So if people want to find out more information, they can visit dln.org.nz, and we're particularly keen to get disabled New Zealanders signed up for that webinar. There's a clear link there, and they can attend the online protest rally. Those outside New Zealand who might be keen to observe, and non-disabled allies, are welcome to check in via Facebook and YouTube. You can like Disabled Leadership Now on Facebook, and you can also follow on Twitter. We'll make sure we put all of that information in the show notes for the podcast. So I appreciate you coming on. I personally feel really motivated and proud of what we've built in actually quite a short time. So we'll look forward to the rally on Sunday, the 13th of February.
Many thanks, Jonathan.
Subscribe to Mosen at Large wherever you get podcasts and join the conversation. Send an email to jonathan@mushroomfm.com, either written down or with an audio attachment, or call our listener line in the US, 864-60-MOSEN, 864-606-6736.
Mosen at Large Podcast.